Prasada Talks Day. We have welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. We are embarking on a new month, which means we have a new theme that we're going to explore here at Prasada. And so the theme of the month, the word of the month is grow. And there's many ways that you can sort of interpret that. We're taking it very literally today and spending our afternoon with you talking about nature. And so welcome to Prasada Talks. Can plants make you happier? I certainly this one does. I'll introduce him in a bit, but first let me introduce the human that sits across from me on the screen. I'm Meg Townsend. I'm a whole being guide with Prasada, and you may recognize Amy Wilson as well if you join us for In for 10. But if not, if Amy is a new face for you, Amy, hello. Thank you so much for joining us, and tell us just a little bit about you and your relationship to nature.
Sure, absolutely. I'm Amy Wilson. I am a Prasada Whole Being Guide. I also lead some In for 10 sessions. Professionally, I am a licensed massage therapist and yoga teacher, and run my own practice. And my relationship with nature, for me, it's always the grounding place. It's, yes, I'm on the ground, but it is my grounding place when I need to reconnect or refresh my mind or just get out of myself, I go to nature.
Awesome. Likewise. And today we're going to talk about the benefits of spending time in nature and our relationship to nature. And then we also are going to dive a little bit into this act of growing and supporting the life cycle of plants. Amy is a really avid gardener, so we'll definitely use this opportunity to get some of that gardening wisdom from you as well. And if you're joining us live in the Zoom room, if you have any questions as we move through the session, please definitely pop those in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those as we move along in our session today. So let's just start and arrive how we start a lot of our presentations here with 3 breaths. So join me in just if there's any screens that you don't need besides this one, set those off to the side, set your phones off to the side for now, and just join me in sliding towards the edge of your seat. So hopefully your feet can be flat on the ground. Gently press your feet into the earth, press your sit bones into your chair, and see if you can lengthen your spine just a little bit, tail to crown. Letting your eyes soften. Maybe even close if that feels comfortable in this moment. And let's tune into our breaths by taking 3 breaths, long inhales through your nose, long exhales out of your mouth. 2 more like that at your pace. After this last exhale, just drop your attention down into your body. Notice how you're showing up in this moment. Notice your energy level, your mood. Take another deep breath in, long breath out. And let your eyes slowly flutter open. All right. I was noticing today as I was taking a short walk outside that the birds, hear the birds again this time of year, and it's just such a comforting thing as we as nature starts to wake up a little more in this spring to summer season. So before we dive into some of the things that we'll discuss today, I wanted to open with this analogy, this sort of structure that Alice Domert, our CEO, this came to her a few years ago, and it really informs a lot about our values, our programming, and just the different aspects of the worlds that we live in. She says we live in these 3 different worlds, right? We live in the inner world of our minds. We live in this world of our physical body, how we move through space, how we get through our days. And then we also live in the world, right? The outside world. Let's call that nature. You can also see it as buildings and dwellings and cars, as well as birds and trees and rocks. So all of these different worlds interface and inform each other as we move through our day. A really striking fact, though, Amy, I don't know if you've read anything about how disconnected, and maybe you notice this in your own life, how disconnected we are from one of these worlds, typically, right, from the outside world. There's this beautiful book, I'll talk about it a little bit later, called Rewilding by Michael Mortali. And he says that the average American, we're now on screen for about 11 hours a day on average. And we spend about 90% of our life indoors. And that increased, I think, as we had to stay indoors for so many years in COVID, like depending on what your job was and how you moved through the world. But a lot of people are spending a lot more time indoors. And this leads to a disconnect of, our minds and our bodies to this outside world, to nature.
Absolutely. I see that in a lot of my clients. I work with a lot of people that are sitting at desks all day, and there is a huge sort of disconnect between even body and mind, like you say. The mind is on its own little path, and that body, needs to have expression somehow. And they're also, it's a lot of sitting in positions that aren't conducive to movement, right? A good, healthy body functioning.
Yeah. And it takes an effect. And there's a reason why we are in all of these worlds. And sometimes we live too much in the mind, right? And we forget that the mind needs nature, and that our mind needs a connection to our body as well. So as we walk through this, we'll talk a little bit about just different benefits of being outside. And then by the end, we really want to leave you with some ideas of how can I start if I don't already start? And for those of you who are live with us in the chat, I'd love for you to share, what is your relationship with nature, with this outside world? Maybe it's really rich and you've got a deep connection. Maybe you're wanting to get more acquainted and looking for how that could happen, looking for ideas. And Amy, I think you also brought up an interesting point of how you said a lot of times we're like inside at our desk. Notice behind us, we have plants. So you can bring the outside world inside as well. And that can really support your whole being and your mental and your physical health. So we're not just saying, of course, we're encouraging you to get out, but we all can't work as we walk along. we can't do our job as we're going on a hike. So
exactly.
Perhaps there are other ways and ideas that we can start to bring those benefits inside as well. And so let's talk about some of those benefits to start. There's many health benefits of being outside. A big one is just spending time outside and in the sunlight. Really helps us to get more vitamin D and increases our serotonin levels. That's a really great point, is to get outside for our minds. There was an interesting Dutch study, and this is for a mental benefit. An interesting Dutch study revealed that spending time gardening, actually studied this, gardening after a stressful event reduced cortisol in those participants of the study, even more so than just sitting down, relaxing and reading a book. Actually getting out in nature, getting their hands dirty, connecting with plants in some way help to reduce those stress hormone levels of cortisol. What benefits, Amy, do you notice? I want to hand the baton to you. What do you notice as you spend time?
For being in nature, for me, like I said, one of them is just being that grounding place. I'm also an introverted person, and a lot of times people don't, introvert, extrovert. I love being with people. I love connecting with people, but at a certain point, my recharge place is I need some time alone. I need to kind of go somewhere, and I can go be in nature and kind of do that by myself. Like a lovely just short walk outside can do it, and it gives me that physical recharge that I need after a lot of times just interacting with other people all day. So I think that can be a huge benefit, particularly for those of us kind of on that introvert spectrum. And I think just the physical aspect, like I said, of moving, I think is so important. As we spend time in these little cramped up positions in front of our screens, we've got to get everything kind of moving and talking,
Yeah. Somebody in the chat says they always walk 20 minutes a day unless it's very extreme weather. Awesome. So you've got that habit down. Beautiful. And one thing to remember too is that not only does nature benefit us, right? We know that it reduces depression, reduces anxiety, but also our ability to spend time in nature benefits nature, especially when we are very conscious about how we are interacting with nature, how we're engaging in that. And there's this some ideas that Amy has that, so Amy and I teach a program called The Joy of Gardening, and Amy brought some really great ideas of just how can we, and what's some important ways that we could spend time in nature, but then also consciously support some of our fellow friends in nature. Do you want to talk about our one big
Sure,
idea?
absolutely. I mean, we're really kind of getting into that concept of reciprocity. And I think that is important as humans interact, but also as we interact with nature. Like, we are caretakers of this land, and the inhabitants on it. And sort of, and what we're going to talk about too in this is bees. I always love bringing up our lovely pollinator friends, particularly around this time of year, because this is when they're really important for our ecosystem. They are one of the things that, are a huge part of our food supply. There is that symbiotic relationship between bees and plants, where they are the pollinators. So about a third of those wonderful fruits and vegetables that are so good for our healthy bodies, right, they would not exist without our bee friends. So I always love just saying, kind of doing the shout out for the pollinators in our world. So a lot of ways you can support that if you are a gardener, is using some native plants and those kinds of things in your garden. There's a lot of really good things like color and things that are really supportive for bees. If you have the ability to do some chemical-free landscaping, that's always a big bonus for pollinators. And particularly in this early springtime, if you're able to have any parts of your lawn that are uncut, that is a wonderful habitat as sort of bees kind of now wake up in the springtime of year. That's a great place for them to kind of have a nice habitat that's safe. And our last thing, which we always loved, we found a wonderful article, because, and it's true, I've been doing this in my garden for years, and I didn't really kind of know it was a thing in some other ways. You can always make a bee watering station in your garden, or even on a patio, particularly as we get into the hot part of the summer. Bees don't really have, they need access to water. They are a living being, right? So you can make some little bee watering stations with some shallow dishes of water, putting some pebbles in so the bees can have a place to land, because they can't swim, but they do need the water. Hummingbird feeders are a great place that they can kind of hang out too. So those are some wonderful ways that you can help support those pollinators that are a big part of that relationship that we have to nature, and how nature supports us with giving us good, healthy food.
I love those ideas in this bee watering station. I am going to do that this year, because they're just such, just in the answer of the question, like, can plants make you happier? I've noticed, like, bees make me happier. I had started a little patio in my last place that I lived, a little patio garden. So it wasn't much, and it was in the city, and it was like, right by the L, and noisy and everything, but things grew. And what was so amazing was the one day, this thrilled me, a bee. I had a bee visitor, and I went out and I was like, welcome, honored guest. I was so excited. I had
Absolutely.
flying up to check out my plants. And so ways to really support and take care of them, because they are, I don't know if they're officially endangered, but a lot of information is coming out that we have to really focus on caring for the bees right now.
Exactly. It's really important.
And also another thought to add to that would be, if you, sometimes bees will like leave their hive, or, relocate. So if you have some swarm of bees, call a beekeeper. Don't call an exterminator, call a beekeeper, because they're very equipped to gather them and take them to a safe place. I see that a lot in the city, especially.
Absolutely.
There's all these bees on my balcony, and everyone's like, please just call a beekeeper. Like,
they're more than happy to come out. That happens a lot. I live actually kind of more out in the suburbs in Chester County, and we do get a lot of swarms of bees, and people will post it on social media, and there's always beekeepers like, I'll be there. They're all about supporting that community and colony. So.
Absolutely. So there are lots of ways that we can support and give back that reciprocity because of
Mhm.
all that nature gives to us. It's what are some ways that we can give back? And at the very least, sometimes it's just spending more time in nature
Mhm.
or with nature, right? If you can't get outside, don't want to get outside at any point, maybe you just start with a plant, right? And it really shifts how we relate to and think about and engage with our behaviors and with
Mhm.
nature overall.
Sure.
So let's talk about, and any questions, pop those in the chat. Let's talk a little bit about some indoor outdoor gardening. That would be one of our first sort of tips is continue a garden or perhaps explore getting started in some way, shape, or form. So
Right.
what are some different ways? And let us know in the chat too if you're here. Are you a gardener? Are you beginner? Are you Amy level, like growing and experimenting and doing all sorts of stuff? What's your experience? And Amy, tell us for like the starter gardener, say you were speaking to me a few years ago who had been told a story that I did not have a green thumb and I couldn't keep anything alive. What would you say? What would you say to me and somebody else who's
So,
here, not a gardener at all, but trying to have an open mind? So where do we begin if we have some level of intrigue?
yeah, I mean, particularly if you have even just, a patio or a little bit of space outside that you want to kind of go get your hands dirty. I mean, great places to start are to think about what kind of plants you want to try and grow. There's a lot of really great hardy perennials that grow outside that they're kind of hard to kill. The whole point is they die in the fall and they come back. And a lot of those are really good native plants that, again, can help support our ecosystem. So I think certainly start kind of figuring out what you want to grow, and a lot of that has to do with, what kind of soil you have, or how much light the area gets. I mean, certainly full sun areas take much different types of plants than ones that are, a partial shade type plant. And then even if you want to get in and have some fun, you can get some great starter plants for even just some herbs or vegetables if you like to cook. There's nothing like grabbing some fresh herbs from your basil plant on your patio. When I lived in the city, I mean, that was one of the things I always had would be some basil, maybe some oregano. And again, they're pretty hardy, so even just some container gardening, some really good, nice soil, and just, taking a look at how the plant's doing. If you start getting yellow spots, you can always look everything up on Google too, which I always love. I think if you really want to go kind of dig in, you can also look in terms of outside plants on either a patio or a garden is color. I mean, we're talking about things and how plants make you happy. By my background, I'm trained as a photographer and a filmmaker, so art has been a huge part of my life. Color is a huge part of my life. And I always kind of plan my gardens around different color schemes and what makes me happy. There's some different, aspects of color theory that you can apply to your garden, whether it's, a monochrome type garden. So everything is kind of all of maybe a different shades of blues and different tints and tones of that. Or we can have something that's sort of harmonious. So maybe I've got blues and purples and a little bit of pinks, kind of everything that's sort of next to each other on that color wheel. Or the one really fun ones that make stuff pop is when you kind of do the contrasting. So I've got blues and oranges and things that are really, gonna kind of pop and give me a lot of color. And colors have different meanings too. So, when looking at that, like our reds and our oranges or yellows, they're really more about sort of passion and hope and activity, right? A lot of the blues and the purples, they're more about sort of calmness and subdued and elegance and those kinds of things. So what do you want to sort of express by looking at your garden? I think is one way to approach it.
I love that. What's your plan? And I would love for you to also talk a little bit about your mindset of gardening, because I saw it come in here. Someone who says, I seem to kill all house plants. That was definitely a story I had for a very long time. And Henry here, he's the only plant that has a name. He was my first experiment. I would not recommend starting your first plant this is a Norfolk pine. They're a little finicky, and I picked like advanced level. I didn't know as my first one. I just liked him because he was very soft. He's like a soft pine, but he's a little wonky because I didn't know how to take plants, but I love him still. But Amy, I love your mindset that you share of just like giving yourself permission to explore,
Oh, yeah.
fail, because there's not really fail. Let's say maybe learn and grow from different experiences
Yeah.
as you navigate caring for plants.
Yeah. Yeah, as I always refer, I'm the tinkerer. I like to go out and just try different things, and every year is a different adventure or try something new. I know someone's talking to you, they mentioned like that the soil is kind of hard and clay-like. And I do understand that. When I first moved to my house that I have now, it wasn't great soil where I had. So I kind of notched out some areas that were going to be my garden. And every year I mean, I did a lot of tilling in. I would add a lot of nutrients, particularly things like vermiculite, which there's now really cool ways you can do that with rice hulls. You can buy rice hulls, so it's very organic. It actually helps provide some pockets in the soil, right? So water can get down. When it's kind of hard and clay-like, the water can't get in, and then your plants aren't going to thrive because they're not getting, a lot of fresh water. So it's really a lot of just work and work, kind of doing that every year. Rice hulls, yes. It's, if you look it up, it's what people typically use is called vermiculite. But now I've found there's a new organic way of doing it with rice hulls. You can buy them like in a bag. Earthworm castings, other things like that are great to add to your soil. Again, those are all really nice organic ways of giving more nutrients. So there's a lot of ways, and it just, I like going out and getting dirty. So I, would add things over the years. Now I've got some nice rich soil. The other option too is certainly doing container gardening. And there's even ones you can buy, like where you either, build that plot, right, out of wood, or you can even buy some kind of containers now that you fill up with like compost and different things, and then finally doing your nice topsoil layer. So that's one way of really creating a nice kind of thriving, contained atmosphere. Like, what's in that soil. Because I totally get it. When I first moved, actually I first moved to my house, our entire backyard was the woman had a dog and she didn't want to grow grass or anything. So it was all mulch. My entire backyard was mulch. It was not good.
You
And
had
actually, then we found a sidewalk underneath at one point too, that somebody had just covered over with dirt. So I guess I've seen it all.
Oh my gosh. And I wish we could show a picture of your garden right now. I didn't have those slides, but I've seen your garden now, and it's like this gorgeous thriving in the earth, right? You didn't do a raised bed. Yeah.
Yeah. I did add a raised bed last year towards the back just because I want to experiment with it. And kind of get some different levels in the garden too, so to easier access, like growing maybe some greens up there and some herbs in the front. So that's my tinkering this year. But yes, it was not a pretty sight. So it was just, some kind of TLC and some hard work. But I got all those good benefits of being outside, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And you do light up when you talk about gardening. I love that. So permission to tinker. I'm going to adopt that word. I love that. Like, you're tinkering, you're a garden scientist, like trial and error. Also, before you start, a little research of like what plants are forgiving. I love this idea of herbs because they are usually pretty hardy. Basil's a little dramatic. Just if you haven't grown basil and you want to try to grow basil, just know it's a little dramatic, but if it looks like it's completely dead, give it a little water and probably within hours it'll perk up again. It's like the drama queen of the herbs, but a lot of them like mint, rosemary, thyme, a lot of those are really hardy and forgiving. So you have this bit of growing, hopefully succeeding, and then using it in your cooking, which is really cool. I always joke like this is hyper local rosemary. It's from 10 feet away, which is just adds an extra fun piece.
Absolutely.
Because we've got a couple minutes left, I want to leave some people with just some ideas. So we've talked about some gardening ideas and permission to have trial and error, but what are just some ideas if someone's not necessarily that into being becoming a tinkerer or a gardener just yet, how else can we interface with nature and get out there? And what are some just simple practices we might start with?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly even just, bringing things into the house. So even if it's just getting some cut flowers is a big thing I do in the winter, just when it's really gray and dark outside, I'll get those big pops of color from just some nice cut flowers that I buy at the store. So, I mean, I think that is bringing the natural world into your house. I think also really, just like we said, like find some ways to get out in nature. If there's even a park, or it's just really going and getting your feet in the dirt. If you have a park that's near you, or any kind of, we have a lovely trail system here in southeastern Pennsylvania that a lot of people participate in, and I think that's a huge way of just going out and breathing some fresh air, and kind of cutting off from your screens, right? Leave the phone in your pocket.
Maybe even considering getting your bare feet in the dirt.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly now we're in the summer, that's the time to do it. I mean, I think there is something, as we talk about the connection of body, mind, and nature, I mean, that's where it makes that full connection. Is in yoga, we always talk about grounding to the earth, but a lot of times we're standing on the floor, which is the earth, but there's nothing like getting your feet in the soil.
Mm-hmm. Getting your feet in the soil. One other thing I love is this idea of finding a sit spot. You can, and maybe it's a consistent place where maybe it's somewhere in a park. If you're in the city, maybe it's, you find a tree that you love and you sit by that. Maybe it's something else, but someplace that you can consistently visit and sit and just sit and breathe and tune into your senses, right? Notice what you see around you. If you're by a tree or in the earth, like, actually touching it, right? Tuning into your sense of touch. There's lots of information we get through our hands.
Absolutely.
Maybe breathing and taking some deep breaths to settle in, and tuning into your sense of smell. I mean, maybe I wouldn't recommend like licking a plant, or maybe not our sense of taste unless we know it's edible, but we can really kind of tune into all of our other senses.
Yeah.
Listening to the breeze as it goes through the trees, right? All of these things, tuning into our senses, being in nature, can really help to settle our nervous system and help to just connect us with more greater awareness of this world of nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea of the bringing the tactile in, because most nerve endings we have, actually we have about 1,000 or so, I think it's in our hands, but our feet have about 7,000 nerve endings. So that's actually one of the biggest places in the body where, yes, that is that true connection of the nervous system and nature. Right? We've got to touch it. We can't do that. We can't do that if looking at a screen. So at some point, yeah.
Exactly. So give yourself permission to like be a curious kid, or imagine, you're going to the woods and imagine you're an alien, have just landed on this, and like, what is this bark I've never seen before? Because chances are you don't have to imagine you're an alien. You probably haven't looked that closely at bark before.
Right.
So, tuning in, spending some time. And it's also a great way to observe, if you have this consistent sit spot, observe the cycles of nature. Right?
Yeah, I love that too. That's great.
And just watching how things shift and change. That's a beautiful practice in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We have hit the 1 p.m. We knew that we could talk for probably 2 more hours about these things. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Hopefully we've left you with some inspiration to get out into that world of nature in some way, shape, or form. And hopefully you have some ideas. Share in the chat if you're here with us live. What's one sort of takeaway? What's one thing you're going to explore from some of these ideas that we've thrown out there today? Let us know. We are going to send out a follow-up email with the recording of this, and I will include some links for the bee watering station and the color theory that Amy talked about, in case those intrigued you and you want to do a little more reading and research about those 2 elements. I'll make sure those links are in the follow-up. Thank you, Amy, for your time and your nature inspiration. I always feel more lit up after that. Oh yeah, and I said I'd mention this book. So again, Rewilding by Micah Mortali. This is a beautiful book, and it has different practices, skills, meditations for spending time in nature. So this is kind of like a handbook for that. I take it every time I go on some sort of outdoor adventure to see, how am I going to connect with nature today? I'm going to walk with awareness, and it gives some details about just how to do that. So if that's of interest as an extra support, check it out. See you all again soon. Until our paths cross again, please be well. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye. Thanks.